Hello to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. Geez, it didn't take much for this 9.5 out of 10 day that I claimed at about 10 o'clock this morning to turn into a 5 out of 10 with this cloud cover and a shower which just passed through. Just goes to show how fickle the weather is here in Australia. And I guess the thing that I absolutely love about Greece during the summer, that is the weather is very, very stable. But I don't mind it. At least it makes it interesting. At least it keeps us on our toes, because we're all trying to figure out whether or not we need an umbrella, we don't need an umbrella, do we need a jacket, it's going to be hot, cold. But that's Sydney. And that's what I love about this most beautiful city of Sydney. Where I'm standing at the moment, I stood probably about 55 years ago, believe it or not, or 53 years ago. So I remember coming down here with my friends. We just jumped aboard a train and got a child excursion ticket, which was about 3 cents back in those days, or something really, really cheap. And we came down here. And I remember getting out here and just saying to myself, wouldn't it be great when I grew up to be able to come down here whenever I wanted, to do whatever I wanted, and just to enjoy just watching the ferries come in, come out, do their waltzes, their pivots, as we're watching now, and just enjoy the smell of the harbour, the colours, watching the tide lift the jetties, and basically just pass my time without pressure or without the concern of having to be somewhere else. Having said that, I'll have my wife Paula pulling my ears once she sees this vlog for today, because I did promise her I'd be getting home by about 2:30. So I'll make this one a quickie so I can get on the bus and get back home. Otherwise, she would have been babysitting the grandchildren for 3 days straight. So I can't wait to go home, have a shower, hopefully put the kids in the car and just go for a drive somewhere. But we'll see. Anyway, let's kick off on this episode. And the book is entitled Everyone Lies. Everyone Lies, or Everybody Lies, I should say, and it's by an author named Seth Stephens-Davidowitz. So this book is basically talking about the habit or the tendency for people to lie in order to save face. So the author kicks off with a quote where he says that we mustn't trust what people tell us, because what they do when they're during information collection and big data or the internet is a different thing altogether. So let me decipher that. What he's saying here is that if you ask people in a survey to give you an answer about anything, chances are they'll shape the answer depending on what they think you're trying to get out of them, and in many ways they'll try and hide their intentions. Look at the fish down there. Can you see the fish? It's a leather jacket just around that second pylon. But what the author is saying is that people are not reliable when you ask them questions, when you do surveys. But what is much more effective is where you use Google and other electronic means to collect information and to use big data or the internet to tap into that information to really find out what people are thinking, what people are doing, and what their beliefs are. And the author says that we can learn a lot about human nature and use it to improve society. Because as we said here, like sometimes when we use our rationale, sometimes when we use our logic to try and predict what people are going to do, usually we're always wrong. Because when you throw emotion and irrational fears and all the other biases into the equation, what normally happens is that people do things which are very, very different to what you think they're going to do. But what the author is saying here is that by analysing their Google searches, what they read, how they respond to certain things, you can build a statistical model using big data to understand human nature across a cultural platform to enable you in an ethical way, I may add. I'm not saying to do this unethically, but in an ethical way to help people who need help. Because what the author is saying is that whilst people are great and a human brain is fantastic, when it all comes down to it at the individual level, people aren't all that good at identifying patterns. And this is where big data is much, much better at analysing and identifying patterns, much, much better than what we humans are. Because what happens is that each and every one of us have a slither of the truth. We don't know what other people are thinking or what they're doing. We kind of assume that other people think the same as we do, but everybody is quite different. Whereas if you're using big data and a big enough sample size, the author here is saying that you can actually tap into and understand the mean and the median sort of feeling, and be able to predict things much, much better. Because the author then goes on to talk about the fact that each person only uses their experience that they've gained in their very, very short lifetimes to make decisions and form judgments. And we only have, as I said before, a slither of the truth and reality at the individual level. So the more mutual friends that we have, the chances are that the more chances we have of breaking up those friendships. It's just an example that the author just throws here, saying that you think in general terms, from a dating perspective or from a relationship perspective, just using your own logic, you'd say that if a husband and wife have a lot of mutual friends together, then that in itself would form a great basis to form a bond to keep them together. But when you use big data to analyse what happens across society, across a bigger sample size, it's the opposite that's true, that families which have a lot of common mutual friends are the ones who end up splitting up. Whereas the people who don't have very many mutual friends tend to stick together. So go figure. But then again, that's just an example. Just to help us think a little bit more about what we're saying, and to learn a little bit more about this big data and how it can help us by using bigger samples. Because what happens with big data, and this is quite confronting, the author says that big data tells us the deep, dark secrets that people simply won't share. Most of us have a part of us which is heavily masked and hidden from everybody, including our partners, our friends, our parents, our grandparents. But by using deep data to dig a little deeper into it, you're able to, I guess, reveal a little more about people in general, and I wouldn't say doing it at the individual level, but people in general, to get that general understanding and general view of what drives human behaviour. So the author here just reminds us, and we've all done it before, every time I do a survey, I don't put too much thought into it. I remember when I was doing surveys when I used to work in the corporate world, how you do those employee opinion surveys. Now you just have some fun there, and you just say things just to irritate people, as opposed to, saying the truth. And this is what the author is saying: is that most people generally lie on surveys, and we do this because we want to look good. It's called living up to a social desirability basis or bias. So everybody has the same sort of thing that drives them. And as we said here, the author is suggesting to us that there's a thing called a social desirability bias that drives a lot of human behaviour. So the author also goes on to say that we also do other things. We lie to impress people, even people we don't know. How funny is that? People often lie to impress even the people that they don't know. And I guess one of the other funny things is, and I've just added this myself, how often do we see those sorts of surveys that are published which talk about the frequency in which certain nationalities have sex? And funny enough, and I laugh every time I see this, the surveys amongst Greek populations seem to show that they are much more into their sexual behaviour than most other people. But I sit and think about all my friends that I know and all the people that I know, and I just have a big grin on my face, knowing that they're all just talking it up and just living their fantasies. Just like a lot of guys living in a fantasy world, and talking about what they'd like to think about themselves, as opposed to the actual truth about their actual sexual endeavours. So that's just one thing that I thought I'd add in, but I think it hopefully explains to you, or just rams home the point, that people simply lie in surveys to impress themselves, to impress other people, to talk it up, to live their fantasy, you name it. But you wouldn't want to, I guess, put too much credence on a survey result. And just like polls in elections end up being completely out of kilter, what people say and what they do are two different things altogether. So the last point that the author talks about, which is quite dramatic, and I guess a lot of people would arc up about this point, but as I say, Jim's 5am Club is not about forming opinion, but about expressing what these authors have in their books. And the author here is of the opinion that society would be better off if the governments used the big data to analyse Google and other platforms to look at helping society as a whole, rather than, of course, delving down into the specific individuals. As I said before, it's all about being ethical. So it's not about knowing what James Peniaris does or what Joe Blogg does with their time on the internet, but it's all about amassing via big data a trend across a cultural group, across an age group, which helps form a picture. And that picture could possibly be used to help people in their endeavours, in their needs. So rather than wait for people to speak up or wait for an election for people to hammer you, what you do is you take some proactive action and create or suggest some policies that may be able to help many people across the board, rather than simply putting together policies for individual groups or individual identities. So moving away from identity politics is something that I'm suggesting. So I guess one of the things to be productive here in this discussion is to farm data using big data to try and identify things or searches or activities that people do that may lead or indicate that there is an increased propensity to do self-harm or to take one's life. So suicide prevention is one of the things that this author talks about, by being able to read what's happening, as I said, not at the individual level. So you're not talking about the police coming and knocking on your door and saying, well, you've been doing all of these things on the internet and we think that, you could be going to commit suicide. But just being on guard. There's a number of fish down there, I don't know if you can see them. The harbour's cleaned up and there's a leather jacket down there swimming around. And so that's the gist of that book. So I'll finish up now, tidy up and go back to the bus stop and head home. And as I said, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club. We've just gone through and done a book summary on a book entitled Everybody Lies by Seth Stephens-Davidowitz. And I hope we can take some material from that book and incorporate it into our program, our inventory of skills to help us grow, develop and become better versions of ourselves. Anyway, I look forward to coming to you again from a different location with a different message, a message of empowerment where we can live, learn and pass it on, and also help each other grow and develop, help each other get through the day, get through the week, get through this life, and to be the wind beneath our wings, the wave beneath our board, the zephyr that billows our sails and flutters our flags, and the guitar strings that create that melody that take us away, take us back to a place where we were in the 60s and 70s, or early 80s I think. But this guy's pretty good, isn't he? Check him out. Having the time of his life. Wow, that's taking me back now. Anyway, thank you very much, and we'll talk again. And it's James here, Jim from Jim's 5am Club at lunchtime, signing off from Circular Quay. And I'll come to you again from a different location with a different message, and we'll see where we go. Geez, I can imagine me doing that. I'd have absolute pain in my plantar fascia. Anyway, take care, and hopefully Sydney will get back its mojo, and we'll have a lot more of these people down here busking away and adding an interest level to this wonderful city of Sydney. Take care, yasas, and we'll chat again. Bye for now. Cheers.